I'm installing the edge connectors. If you can hear a fan, it's because I've force ventilated my entire workspace. There is a lot of soldering, so we'll just quickly show. It's very important to line these slots up by eye. I checked with some experts and they said yep, the holes are good enough and they're right, but I also then just tweaked them around, having only attached them with 2 points apiece by eye until they were nice straight lines. That's a very, very, very long connector. That's must be nearly was probably more than a foot long. Hey, I tried to find a tape quickly. So by the time you've got something in the ISO slots and the Zorro slots, you're out to 28 centimeters, which is 11 inches in American money. So we'll flip this, and the job now is to just, now they're all tacked in quite solidly, the job is to just tear around and solder them all in. I've done this edge over here, this is a video slot. The Zorro slot pins are relatively long. I may have to trim all of those, I think. I think that's what the John Hertel's guide says he did from memory, but if you're interested you should read his work and not my digest of it. It's compulsory reading, I think, for a project like this. So I've just got to solder them all in. Now I've got the iron set to about 400 Celsius, which is a little bit on the hot side for some of the more fine traces, but speed's my friend. But the slots themselves are very, very, very long. Have very long pins in them and they sink a lot of heat. I should say too, these two jeweler screwdrivers, one fits behind a pin in the slot and one goes in front. And a couple of the pins were slightly misformed, and with that combination I found it was easy to realign them such that they were indistinguishable from ones that had never been tweaked over by something at some stage, even though they were new sockets. So yeah, I can show you. Oh, I won't show you that. We're ready to go. You get the idea that the smaller screwdriver goes on the outside edge of the card slot behind the pin, and the bigger one provides a surface against which to manipulate it. Being careful not to scratch it. It was surprisingly easy. When I saw I was like, oh, how do you get those bang on again? It actually wasn't nearly as hard as I thought. Now I did actually think about using a bigger iron for this, and then I wouldn't need as much heat. And I do have an array of soldering tips that suggests that I'm a hoarder of them. I love them. They're only Chinese ones, like well, only Chinese. Chinese make great stuff, but they're not name brand ones. I think this size tip I'll buy a Hako and see, or Hako and see if it's any better. I do know that with the old school tips that slip over the ceramic heater, when I've turned them apart on my lathe to inspect their interior, there is a big difference. So I'm going to be no, well, for the camera I'll come up here and do this fellow here, and I may see if I can get you some zoom. No, that's about all the zoom I've got. I'll turn the autofocus off, so I might be able to make it a little crisper for you. Oh, that's I think that's pretty alright. I don't want to move the camera any lower because it'd I don't want to move the camera any lower because it'll be in my way. Yeah, it'll just be in my way. As I've said before in here, what I've done, not what you should do. So I don't need to show it as a tutorial type guide. The aim of this YouTube stuff I'm doing is not, yeah, see, that required quite a bit of heat. The the aim of this is not to win me any awards with the YouTube community or to get a certain number of subscribers. I just like it. And in fact, I was finding this work I don't know about boring, but certainly slow and a little on the lonely side, I guess, after a fashion. Not like I've got someone next to me doing it, having a laugh. I know that'll work for me anyway. Sometimes I really just need to concentrate. But this was a component like a resistor pack or an IC, of course. I wouldn't do all of the legs side by side like this. Just clear off some of that starting to burn flux off the iron, if only because it helps with visibility. So heat goes on, solder goes on. Some solder on the tip of the iron helps transfer the heat, of course. So it's a bit of a hybrid maneuver. Like a completely cleaned iron has trouble making a good thermal contact, of course. So heat goes on. This one's going to be easy enough. Next time we get to something with a bit of bulk to it, well, we'll slow the process down. Yeah, we'll do this one. So heat goes on. Tiny bit of solder to help transfer the heat from the iron onto the board. I'm mostly trying to touch the board, and then once it's been there for a while, then the solder goes in, and then a little bit of dwell time at the end to let it flow. Solder on, rest of the solder in, and with the amount of copper around this, there's the dwell time. And I've taken to, and this is a new thing for me, I've taken to lifting the iron up the leg as it comes off. I don't know if that's proper practice or not, and I think it probably could conceal a dry joint by creating the kind of approximately right shape on the leg. But I know I've got it right, and it allows me to go with my preference, which is to have a little bit too much solder floating around. And as I do that action at the end, if there's still a fair bit there, then I know there's too much on the iron. I can give it a little clean in my copper wool over here, the brass wool. Sometimes you try and do one and it just won't take, and it's, I think, often because there's a lot of copper on the other side of the board. You see, these fellows, they don't have connections on this side of the board at all, these ones I'm doing now. But the via, the hole, I should say, oh, I guess it is a via as well, but it's a via that's designed to take a component. It's plated right the way through. If I were to only make good connection on this side of the board, it would be electrically fine. However, these are connectors, and I need these to be mechanically fine as well. So by seeing that slightly extended dwell time to let the solder really drain in and fill the space between the leg and the board, so that it's nice and snug and not as inclined to crack. Yeah, fascinating. If you're still here, then this is something you should do yourself, I reckon. It is daunting. There are great ways to start. I mean, there are so many kits that are available, and this isn't like a introduction to Arduino kit style soldering experience. This one I was talking and forgot to notice that I was on a ground plane, and now I've got a craggy mess. The risks of YouTubing. Oh no, and now I've got it. Oh, I got the heat in now and the solder has definitely flowed, but there's just a little too much there, and more than I can readily pick up with the iron, so I'm just gonna, it's only the second time I've done this in the whole build. Just gonna pull a bit off with the wick and then just check that that's beautiful. Probably good to show that. Seriously, the second time I've used solder wick, both times today. These connectors are a murderous thing in some respects and just boringly easy in others. Yeah, sometimes it just, and of course the technique, you can see there that I'm not touching, well maybe you can't, but the solder's not touching the iron. The solder's touching the board. And that's its job, is to tin the board, the flux is to not get turned to smoke by the soldering iron, but to flow out of the center of the solder wire and clean the surfaces sufficiently so as to allow for the, really had to wick that one, for the application of solder. It's like standing in a bloody wind tunnel and the smoke's still coming for me. I should put on a mask. I got a little fan on my bench here, but it's very unpleasant and noisy, and it's a cheap one that I thought would be cool, but it's not. These slots I'm doing here are, I think, an extension to the ISA slot, as in like, well, they're definitely an extension to the ISA slot, in that there's an ISA slot and then there's this thing above it. I think without these little short ones you can still have an ISA slot, but maybe it's eISA. So I don't know how long this video should be. I guess given my philosophy it can be as much like watching Mr. Bull fix the road. It can take as long as it takes. That is an ugly joint, that one. We'll redo that. I think I mentioned before this flux is ugly. Right, so heat, lots of heat, a bit more solder on the tip of the iron just to get it transferring the heat, and then boom, in goes the, and we're done. Yeah, I think I mentioned before this flux is not, doesn't create instantly beautiful joints, but it is both flux I don't have to clean off and flux which I can clean off if I want to in water, and that is not a usual combination. Most fluxes that have to be cleaned, that can be cleaned off in water, have to be cleaned off, or they'll eat stuff. But it just doesn't produce an instantly glossy joint in the way that cheap, common, no clean flux can, annoyingly. Along we go. Once I've done these, I'm not going to do them all at once. I'm going to pick up a Amiga floppy drive. I'm doing a lot of this lately. I've recently acquired time in my life. This is not all I do. Loudspeaker construction's my dearest hobby. Actually, a friend gave me box design software that I've got running on my Amiga 2000, the one that's not in front of me right now. And I don't know it. I mean, normally, I have access to whatever software I might want, but I normally check all my loudspeaker box designs with WinISD. I keep a, oh, it's magnificent. I keep a, let's go check the time. I'm good. I keep a Windows X, well, I keep a laptop that I think shipped with the awful Windows Windows Vista, oh, here we go, lots of heat, a little bit on the iron, help transfer the heat, waiting, apply the solder to the board, let it flow, and yeah, you still get little, the iron, if things aren't hot enough, as the iron pulls away, it leaves a little wisp, and it sort of did, but I mean, I'm literally, with these 1.5 times glasses from the pharmacy, my eyesight is good enough to literally see the solder run out onto the pads and then sort of disappear as it drains through the board and down the leg to the other side. This has been excellent, and I fully suspect this computer to work, and if it doesn't, it will be hugely disappointing, and I won't try anything like it ever again, most likely. But I do still do much smaller projects like electronic crossovers and stuff for my loudspeakers, and my soldering skills on the back of this project have gone from totally acceptable to proficient. And of course, it's not just the practice. It's I've spoken to a lot of people about it too and shared ideas on it, social media and forums. Practice is best done in not excessive sized chunks, so it's better approximately to do 20 minutes of soldering. In terms of the learning achieved, it's probably better to do, say, 20 minutes of soldering 3 times than an hour of soldering once. And the nature of this project is such that that's what you end up doing. The only thing about practice that is a bit difficult with something like this is that, and this is why it's great to experiment on something, which, I mean, over the years I've done many little projects, but people will tend to sort of, if there's some sort of fundamental technique that a person has, and then they set about practicing to get better, and the environment in which the practice occurs is a high stakes game, the results are unlikely to be as good as the same person who's practicing in an environment where failure is an option, and they're free to try approaches to the work that are not a whole lot like previous approaches, because they create opportunities to learn and to observe the new ways in which the task can be achieved. And while this is a fairly high stakes game, I have had that opportunity because I found that with this being a brand new high quality board compared to anything else I've ever soldered on, and I cleaned it with isopropyl alcohol before I began, I have found this board to be extremely welcoming of solder, and I've also found that it shows no signs of heat stress with any kind of normal soldering behaviour that I might throw at it. And so, you know, I've even tried soldering left-handed and had a decent result. Just knowing, you know, having a bit of confidence with solder wick if things go wrong. Here we go, got a fat one again. A little bit of solder on the iron just to help wick in the heat, and then right in deep down low near the board with the flux, and then a nice long dwell time. The kind of dwell time I would not have been confident with not all that long ago. But yes, the best way to learn a task is distributed rather than mass practice, and to, at times, not all the time, you can become lazy, however motivated you might be. It's my neighbour's dogs. He's only got them for a little while. They're rescue dogs. Yeah, good guy. Dogs aren't bad either. If they annoy me, I ask them to be quiet, and they do. You've got to be friendly with them. They've had a tough life already. Oh, hello. Getting tired. Stop, revive, survive. Yes, doing it in a way that creates opportunities for experimentation. Very important. And let's be honest, the chance of me using all of these ISO slots is just about zero. So which one did I do first? The CPU slot, which I'll definitely be using. Dumb. But it went fine. I'm like quite confident. Whether I'm competent is a separate question, but I'm quite confident. So, as you can see, it's just a matter of just joining the dots, and I'm most of the way there. I mean, I've got two more of these, the main ISO sockets to do, and then these Zorro slots, and it's done. I mean, I think I've said before, you know, it's long dwell time. Like, till it gets boring even. It's madness. And here we go again. Oh, hang on, I've changed sockets. Oh, dude. Talking, not concentrating. It's alright, it's got to have solder eventually. Cider. I don't understand that. I get other languages and other accents, but sometimes words just get completely lost. Like Kiwis. I only live across the Tasman Sea from here. I refuse to call it the ditch. It's a beautiful expanse of water. I don't know what they do. Like, you know, the way they swap the E's and the I's, there must be miscommunication, and I'm not quite sure. But I guess that's partly accent, right? That's sort of manageable, but I can't fathom how solder became soda, or even cider. It's just beyond me. But you know, Australian English is not a beautiful thing a lot of the time either. So, same with height. You know, length, width, depth, breadth, and height. It's an interesting one. And with my background, you know, language is my thing. I'm not a gatekeeper, and I think that good grammar and stuff is beautiful, but at the same time, I think the claim that if the use of language is effective in communicating an idea, then, you know, the primary objectives of the mission have been achieved. The rest is art. I guess like martial arts, right? I mean, it doesn't require a black belt. With good training, you know, with good training focused on self-defense, effective self-defense can be achieved long before a black belt is. You end up a person can end up fairly rapidly with the martial and then not go on and get the art. Ah, there's smoke. I mean, there's not a lot in the room, but, and I'm not really breathing it in. And I've got a pedestal fan at the door blowing into the room and the window's open. Which quite frankly at this time of year in Canberra is a bit cold. But and I've checked the MSDS for the solder, material safety data sheet, and it's it was halogen free. I don't know. There were certainly no particular precautions about this flux that I didn't see for any other flux. I think the traditional stuff for electronics is made of pine tree resin. I'll check the time again. I've no idea how much of it's passing. Yeah. It focuses. It's not bad. If I turn on the autofocus, the problem is it'll probably jump around while I'm working. That said, I might show something I haven't previously shown too. I'm going to be able to finish everything but the Zorro slots. Yep, I am. And then I'm going to go. You can see the sort of solder is sort of dancing around there. It's because I got too much stick out. Like TIG welding with too much stick out. Well, you kind of need it with TIG welding because it's so freaking hot. But it sort of doesn't matter. I found I can kind of wave it around and it sort of just has to kiss the iron and transfer some heat. Kind of it's wobbling as it passes across the pad a bit, distributes the flux nicely. This last one's the tricky one in this particular photo. In terms of heat, it's lucky solder's not sort of super expensive. Well, like, I've never done a project like this before. You can actually watch your solder reel empty out. It's quite something. Well, that last one was barely hot enough. What's going on there? There we go. That's got it properly done. It's just looking for that flow. Part of the reason to prune off the excess leg length on those Zorro slots before I solder is that doing this I've learned it's amazing how much of the heat disappears up the uncut legs. I got to a point installing things like resistors and the ceramic capacitors where I'd actually wouldn't bother trimming the legs, and those EMI things and the ferrite beads that have some real mass to them. I started actually trimming the lead if I knew that I was going to have to heat a lot of copper on the board just to solder it in, just so that I had that bit less to heat, because it just creates a nicer flow of the solder. And that's the thing, you can be told how to solder and you can follow that rule, but until the soldering behaviour, the actual doing of the soldering, until the soldering behaviour is controlled, until expertise in the creation of a good solder joint starts to arrive through review of one's own work and concentration and commitment to excellence in that particular task, a person's just following the rule, and the rule is lacking in detail. The beginnings of expertise are the beginnings of the point in time where the task is not, the performance of the task is not controlled by the rule, by the instructions, but is controlled by the behaviour of the work as it's being done, by the stimulus provided by the doing of the work, rather than being told to hold the iron on for a certain number of seconds or until the solder does something in particular. The mastery comes, and I'm not saying I'm a master, but the mastery comes with putting those rules aside and allowing the behaviour of the work that's being done to control the behaviour of the worker. I could probably write an essay on that, but I don't need to. Skinner already did it. But that's the difference between behaviour that's governed by rules and behaviour that's governed by contingencies. Skinner's example was about working bellows, and I think the apprentice was told up fast, down slow is the way to make the fire glow. And the apprentice originally would just follow that rule, but an interested apprentice who was watching the fire and watching the smith and understanding what it was the smith required by discussions with the smith would stop following this fixed rule and start to move the bellows with substantial precision, based on the sound and the colour and perhaps the smell of the forge. Anyway, that's, unless I've missed a row, which I don't appear to have, that's everything but these main Zorro slots, the Amiga slots, and I need to trim those. I need to be careful I don't lose any trimmings under something now. This has gotten to a point where, yeah, it's a whole big thing. Anyway, bit of a long video. No one says you have to watch it. And if you still are, like I say, maybe a project like this is for you.